Alright, so this go around we'll be looking at a video called How Americans Got So Stupid. Now, it's from a channel called Brit Monkey, so y'all go over there and check them out. Show their channel some love. I'm interested to see I'm interested to see this video, because everybody's got an opinion on how it's happened. So, well, let's go ahead and get into it, shall we?
You wanna know how I got this dislike ratio? I make a video praising the Soviet Union, and nobody bats an eye. I make a video praising the United States, and everybody loses their minds. Okay, fine, I hear you. You only want to hear things that confirm what you already believe. I get it. Let's talk about why Americans are stupid.
Oh, dear Lord. Okay, so I like that right there with talking about praising a communist, which is popular to do right now, and then basically a video on the faults of America, and of course, you know, it said nobody bats an eye, so apparently it's not going to get the views, but he's talking about the dislike ratio, and it's the thing about it is, though, you're going to take and have two different viewpoints from people on either one of those on the U.S. Probably a lot of Americans might not appreciate that, but the rest of the world's going to take and see something. So it's all these videos, like the one we've looked at already on the channel, just random, teens and young adults in America being asked simple questions, and they get them all wrong. Definitely not hard to confirm some negative biases.
Only want to hear things that confirm what you already believe. I get it. Let's talk about why Americans are stupid. There's a famous episode of the Jimberly Kimberly live show where clueless residents of Los Angeles fail to name a single country.
Is it South Africa?
Yeah, the country of Asia.
Greenland or Iceland or something?
Although these are no doubt cherry-picked, and I'm sure if you stood in a big city all day and shoved a camera in people's faces and asked them questions, you'd be able to find 3 minutes worth of people who couldn't answer on the spot.
Miss, for $1, name a woman.
Name a woman?
Yeah.
But the stereotype that Americans are ignorant about the wider world is largely true. These people can't name a country because they don't care about other countries. 40% of Americans have a passport, compared to 66% of Canadians and 76% of Brits. In 1994, it was only 10% of Americans. But that doesn't mean Americans have gotten more globe-trotting since then. It was because after an above-average episode of the news, it became mandatory to need a passport when entering Canada and Mexico.
But see, the thing about that is, though, a lot of Americans don't feel the need to take and go to other countries. Now, I'm tempted to do a video to explain the reason why a lot of Americans don't see the need to get a passport. Number one, there's so much stuff that we could go see. If I want to go on vacation, I could literally go to another part of my state. The food up there is going to be, I can get the same food up there that I can get down here, but there's going to be local delicacies there that aren't the same down here. There's the geographical differences in the foothills upstate towards compared to recall the low country. We sit below sea level here for the most part. It's mostly flat here. It's all rolling hills, and you can see mountains in the distance up there. Not only that, the accent from people barely 2 hours away is different than what it is here. I can go one state over, and I can go gem mining. I can't go gem mining here in my state. I can take and see, I can go to the mountains in North Carolina or Tennessee. Hell, in Tennessee, you can go to what's Lookout Mountain, where you can actually see the convergence of Tennessee, Virginia, and Kentucky. You can see all three, where all three states basically come together. Like, it's just such beautiful. You don't have stuff like that here. I can go across the country and go to places like the Grand Canyon, or I can go to LA, which is completely different culture, completely, just everything's completely different. San Francisco was completely different. I could go to Key West, Florida, completely different. I can go just to Savannah, Georgia, and things are different than what they are in Charleston, South Carolina. I can go to Atlanta. I can take and go, I've been to Boston. Boston was way different. The accents, the way people talk, you can't get sweet tea. There's a myriad of reasons of why a lot of Americans don't see the need to get outside the U.S. because there is so much stuff to see here geographically, food-wise, attraction-wise. There's just so much stuff. I'm like, if I want to take and go see a glacier, I can take and go up to Alaska. If I want to take and go see beautiful beaches, I've got a lot of the East Coast. I've also got somewhere like Hawaii, though, which is pretty exotic for most Americans because of the distance that it takes. You've got to take a plane to get to one of our states. Like, there's no a boat or a plane. You can't just drive to it. So there's so many reasons why Americans don't see the need to take and get passports. It's just, there's so much you can do here if you have the money to travel. The other thing is the prohibitive cost sometimes to actually travel out of country.
So it's fair to say that a very small percent of Americans will be leaving this corner of the world. As I said in a previous video, America has all you'd ever want geographically within her borders. Why go anywhere else? The foreign cultures, maybe? Americans don't care about that either. On the list of the highest grossing movies in the USA, you have to go all the way to 520th place to get a movie that isn't American. It's Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, by the way. Couldn't even beat The Nutty Professor. Somebody please check up on Ang Lee. I think he might have killed himself.
Right?
Neither do
Okay.
global affairs hold the average American's interest. When asked about the Kyoto Climate Accords, who the Taliban are, or who Nicolas Sarkozy is, Americans are woefully underinformed compared to other developed nations. In 2009, only half knew that last year's Olympics were held in Beijing. Oh, but of course, when asked to name American celebrities, they had no trouble at all.
But part of that's also due to the way media is done here. Like, you learn stuff in school, right? And I'll be honest with you, from the way things were taught whenever I was in school, the way things are taught now is completely different. Like, there's a lot of stuff I was taught in school that's not taught now, as far as the way with our political system works. I actually took 2 years of world history in high school. I took very much civics classes, or civics. What were they called when I was in public school? Because it wasn't civics, it was... And it wasn't called history either. It's something to do... anyways, but it took and taught you about different aspects of different cultures and things like that. So things like that aren't taught above surface level these days. And a lot of people, after you get out of school, they don't care nothing about what they've learned unless they're something like a history buff, or they, I've always paid attention to history and politics, so there's a reason why I know a good bit more than a lot of other folks. But once they get out of high school and either go to college and are learning about whatever trade or getting a certificate for whatever specialty, specialized skill that they're going for, there's no need to take and think anything else about it. The way our media works, if it's not sensationalized, everything has to do with our media. So it's depressing, but it's not surprising to me.
At the same time, we non-Americans are flooded with American culture. Some British people know more about American politics and history than their own.
Once you're dropped into the trench, depth, or the z-axis is...
It's Z-axis, you floppy-haired moron. France had to pass laws banning radio stations from playing too much American music. There are only two countries in the world where Coca-Cola is not sold. Wait, scratch that. This journalist from Finland bought a Coke at a water park in Pyongyang in 2017. And what's this hiding in the background of somebody's holiday snaps at the National Hotel de Cuba? Look, you know something's up when remote tribesmen in the Amazon rainforest who don't even have electricity know who Michael Jackson is. Americans used to be quite well read. After the Second World War, Americans consumed 63% of all the newspapers in the world, and they used this to their advantage. In 1948, the newly formed United Nations created a list of human rights that all countries should strive to uphold. One area that Americans were particularly interested in was this one, Article 19. Everyone has the right to freedom of expression and opinion, and receive and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers.
Wow,
what the
that's
USA
changed.
wanted was a completely level playing field. Anyone can buy any media from any other country. A global free market of ideas, released from the shackles of censorship. For if anyone can gain access to the truth, we cannot be marched into the same kind of ignorance and intolerance that characterized the Axis nations of the war. This is admirable. Freedom of speech is a core value of the United States and many other allied nations. But some delegates, like those from India, questioned the US's motives. If you believe in an equal access to information and culture, shouldn't you redistribute some of your media creating capacity to developing nations like ours, so that we have an equal opportunity to tell the world our stories? The Americans would not budge. Of course, they knew deep down that India was right. The American delegation to the convention was highly populated by journalists and media magnates. They knew that if countries couldn't afford their own news, they would be increasingly reliant on buying news from American wire companies like.
And the problem is also, see, that's a problem. It's still a problem. The media magnates in this country. That we get 90% of our news news from two conglomerates, and I don't care. Fox News, CNN, and MSNBC, everything like that is just owned by two different conglomerates. That's it. So you're getting spin that these conglomerates want you to hear. Everything's become so corporatized here that, yeah, it's definitely not the same. And it's easier to take and control stupid, uninformed people than it is people that are intelligent and educated in some fashion, or at least are on top of what's going on.
The Associated Press, which was good for both the media company's profits, but also the US State Department, who would no doubt have been licking their lips at the prospect of 1 billion people reading news with a specific American spin on it. In 1944, the Associated Press sold news to 38 countries. Within 8 years, that had doubled to 70 countries. In the 1950s, around half of films shown in European and Asian cinemas were American, 2/3 in Mexico, Brazil, and Argentina. Which makes sense. Americans made grand technicolor films brimming with Hollywood sparkle because they could afford to, whereas war-torn Europe, impoverished Mexico, and nuclear-obliterated Japan were stuck making small-scale comedies to keep up morale. One of the most popular French movies in 40s France was 1949's The Big Day, a mostly plotless movie where a whimsical French postman gets into wacky mischief in a quaint village. There just wasn't the money or resources for anything else. Hollywood captured the European public's imagination, and they wanted more. But why is it only a one-way street? Because while you can do or say whatever you want within the United States, the Constitution also says that the American government can regulate what goes in or out.
Yep.
During the Cold War, anything that might be considered communist propaganda could be seized by the post office and never delivered. Books or even souvenirs from communist countries, for example. Pamphlets criticizing US foreign policy. Immigration reached a low point in the early 70s.
I love that article right there where it shows Guatemala. Yeah, State Department plot in Guatemala restores rule of United Fruit, because United Fruit or the bananas and stuff like that's yeah, that's exactly what happened. Overthrew a government, like did a complete coup, and it was because there was, anyways, yeah. So, bro, you're definitely, that's not something you're going to read about here. That's, at least not headline type news. No. That's stuff that even to this day you have to dig for, or take and find a channel that, or a documentary of some sort that tells a story of it. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Criticizing US foreign policy. Immigration reached a low point in the early 70s, with only 4.7% of Americans being foreign-born, limiting Americans' interaction with different cultures. Obviously, it wasn't totally like North Korea. Plenty of foreign movies and music were allowed into the US. But the media that caught on was either already Americanized, or so plastically exotic that it doesn't really say anything about the culture where it's from. The Beatles were British, yes, but they got their start covering American rock and roll musicians. When John Lennon stepped out of line, the American government made sure that he knew it. Movies imported from Japan were mostly samurai flicks, and very few movies set in the modern day. The film Ikiru is...
which the Magnificent Seven is based off of the Western, the Magnificent Seven. I believe that's the name of it, the Magnificent Seven. Yeah, that's actually based off of an old samurai film from, I believe it's like the 40s or early 50s, if I'm not mistaken. So even our media takes and steals from other media and, puts the American spin on things.
Movies imported from Japan were mostly samurai flicks, and very few movies set in the modern day. The film Ikiru is widely considered the best Japanese film ever made, if you ignore people who have never felt the touch of a woman. But this existential drama about a depressed, lonely man was only given a limited release in California, and the poster was edited to feature a stripper who is only in the movie for like 1 minute. The narrow stream of European movies that made it into the USA came in the form of the French New Wave cinema, movies that were stylistically inspired by American films, but also so stuffy that few audiences would ever want to watch them anyway.
Qu'est-ce que ça peut te faire?
Ça ne va pas, non?
Non, rien. Je voulais dire cette phrase avec une idée précise. Je ne savais pas quelle était la meilleure façon d'exprimer cette idée. Ou plutôt, je le savais. Mais maintenant, je ne sais plus.
This was further stifled by the Hays Code, a set of extremely strict regulations that were in place from 1934 to 1968. If you've ever wondered why old black and white films seem so dry, it's because of these rules. Some things that were completely banned from ever being shown in any film included bad guys winning. All movies had to end with the police outwitting the evil criminals or the criminals causing their own demise. Any nudity, even the silhouette of a booba, is an instant ban. Blood or dead bodies. When people get shot in old films, they usually just clutch the wound, but no actual blood is seen. Pointing a gun at somebody in the same frame. This is why
it's one of the reasons why the tension that was built in a lot of older movies, in my opinion, beats a lot of the tension that's done in newer movies. Now, there are exceptions to that, but the atmospheric tension that's built, and even without the blood and gore, in my opinion, in a lot of the older movies, is absolutely magnificent. But this explains the reason why that would have to be the case to take, for the dramatization to actually work.
Guns are always held at waist height. Kissing for longer than 3 seconds. Interracial couples. White people as slaves. Criticism of religion or of any other country. Naturally, this prevented the more artistically liberal European films from being shown in American cinemas, and when they did get a US release, they were usually edited to remove the violence in movies and sex on TV to comply with the good old-fashioned values. At least until the rules were abolished in 1968 and replaced by the age rating system we have today. Even as the Cold War ended and the internet gave Americans unparalleled access to the rest of the world and all of human knowledge, they still preferred to hang out on a handful of American-made websites dominated by Americans. The insular culture of 20th century America has carried over to the 21st. Tightened border security after Septiembre Undécimo means foreign musicians can have a hard time getting visas. In 2002, the touring visa of a German orchestra was cancelled after it was discovered the cellist had a criminal record for shoplifting a pair of tweezers in 1991. When they tried again for a visa in 2004, the cellist had to undergo an hour-long interview with Homeland Security and had to physically pick up his visa from the US Embassy. Global cultures might be more present in American media, but they're always through the lens of American characters, such as The Last Samurai starring Tom Cruise, where he plays a white guy in 1870s Japan. 7 Years in Tibet, another American in China. Indiana Jones, American in Egypt. The Bourne Identity, American in France. Inglourious Basterds.
But in defense of The Bourne Identity, it's based off Robert Ludlum books, so that's kind of the MO of the book.
Americans in German-occupied France. And for the ladies in the audience, Mamma Mia. For a movie set on a Greek island, there's not a single Greek person in the entire movie! Is there any hope for America, or are they destined to be a stinky, dumb, redneck country forever? Maybe. In 2000, 92% of the music in the USA Top 50 was American, making it the second most insulated market in the world after Pakistan. But today it's more like 60%, with Brits, Canadians, Latin Americans and Africans making themselves more seen in the charts. Each year there are more foreign films nominated at the Academy Awards than ever before. What used to be an American-only pay-to-win awards show is now an international pay-to-win awards show. As social media platforms have an element of randomness in what they show users, there is a higher chance of Americans being shown videos from other countries, forcing them to take note of what is happening. It seems the revolution will be TikToked. I've been giving the impression throughout this video.
It's funny he says that with the revolution being TikToked. One of the reasons why, in my opinion, here they want to ban TikTok, because unlike they were able to do with Twitter, in which they, Twitter nuked any kind of talk against COVID regulations, the Hunter Biden's laptop and stuff like that, and you were just deplatformed or completely just shadow banned on that. Like there's a lot of stuff. We see glimpses of stuff that's happening in the world news on our TVs, like in France with the protests and stuff like that. And even here in our own country, like with Palestine, Ohio, where the train derailment happened. And there's numerous TikToks that have been done by people who are trying to take and figure out why it took so long and such a wide area has now been quarantined, whenever it's originally just pretty much right at the site and stuff like that. Yeah, they can't control our media, our government, and they can't control what people are seeing. And there's a lot more stuff that you can see on there by people on the ground that you can't on the news and other sources, because it just wouldn't fit into an algorithm. Facebook, YouTube. So yeah, I think that's the reason why the U.S. wants to take and get rid of it. They can say whatever they want with China collecting our data, but they've been doing that. The U.S. has been doing that to our citizens, and Facebook has already gotten in trouble with doing that and selling our information to other countries like Russia and China. But TikTok is the problem. So I think it's the fact that our government can't take and keep a hold on what's being shown or what narratives are allowed to flow on there. And it's not just dumb people that are just dancing on TikTok if you know where to look. So there's that as well. But yeah, I agree. The revolution will be TikTok.
That it's all or most Americans who are terminally uneducated. But American ignorance isn't as evenly distributed as you'd think. That study I mentioned earlier, when adjusting for English proficiency, income and education levels, Americans are really no different from their European counterparts, and in some cases marginally smarter. Knowledge about the wider world even correlates to political views, and not in the way that you'd think. A 2022 survey asked Americans 12 questions about the world, such as who is the British Prime Minister, what does the Indian flag look like, and what this symbol represents. The people who answered the most questions correctly were committed Democrats and committed Republicans. Swing voters, those enlightened centrist...
It's funny because most people aren't going to expect anything Republican to, but this is the reason why they're able to take and do it. Number one, they keep themselves informed. Now, granted, they keep themselves informed with a slant opposite of the way Democrats would take and keep themselves informed, but they're going to know more about the world than, like they're saying, centrists who just want to get along.
Chads were the stupidest. Only 40% of moderate Republicans could name the US Secretary of State, compared to 60% of convicted Republicans. Only half of moderate Democrats knew that the USMCA trade agreement replaced NAFTA, compared to 66% of convicted Democrats. Also, I just thought it was funny that the more Americans know about the European Union, the more favourable view they have of it. So are Americans ignorant? Many of them are, but it isn't their fault. It's a mix of geography, American imperialism, Cold War paranoia, moral puritanism, and economic factors that create a paradoxical nation that is both the most expansive empire, but also an informational prison of their own making. God bless you, stupid bastards.
As an American, this is an interesting video to watch because they're not wrong whatsoever in the estimation of how things, and like, it's very, as an American, if you watch this and you've got, how am I going to put this? Number one, if you're uninformed but you have a set of beliefs, it's probably going to piss you off because it's not the ultra USA you're seeing, that you're used to all the time. Because even people who are, USA, but are intelligent, they're like, USA, but we need to fix this shit right here. USA, but we need to fix, like, that's how it works. So unless you've got, those that just surface level USA, they're probably going to get pissed off with this because they're going to be like, oh no, that's propaganda. That's some kind of Marxist or socialist or, whatever, and that they're going to use to take and discredit, try to discredit it with or demonize the video with. But it's completely, it's interesting. But like I said, there are a lot of reasons, at least in my opinion, why we don't have. Number one, why more of us don't have passports. It's just, number one, it's expensive to travel, but number two, we've got so much here that we can, like, I've got stuff that there's sites here I could take a week and go upstate and still not see all the Civil War and Revolutionary War historical sites, and I could also take a week past that to take and just go see some of the unique attractions in the upper part of the state. That's not including just traveling 45 minutes away to some place like Myrtle Beach or North Myrtle Beach, or even 45 minutes in the other direction towards Savannah, going to Bluffton and Hilton Head and stuff like that, and seeing some of the Gullah and Geechee communities and some of the different some of the different ecological places there than what I have here around me. Like, that's just my own state. That's not including if I want to go to another state to experience stuff there, because not every state is the same. Like, we are one country, but you basically, more folks need to take a look at U.S. as 50 individual countries who have joined in a union. So we follow the federal government on the Constitution and whatever the EPA and some other three-letter agencies take and push out. But everything else, we're completely different from each other. Completely different from each other. So I think that's one thing that's not taken into account with the whole, more Americans don't, because we don't feel the need to take and travel a lot of times. It's just, I've never seen the Grand Canyon. I'd like to go down Route 66. I'd love to go to Seattle, Washington. They're all different than where I'm at. All of it. So, I mean, it's massive on that. But the insular way we take and do, number one, the media is presented to us, I think is really a discredit to, which most people that pay attention, they're going to take and look at stuff outside of Fox, MSNBC, CNN, NBC, ABC, stuff like that. Or be looking at papers from the UK, or, news sources from the UK, news sources from Europe, and things of that nature. So it's, even if they got to take and get stuff, take and go to the Google Translate, if whatever they're trying to find out isn't translated into English, so they can read it. But this is a spot on video in my opinion. Like, this is really well done. So I hope y'all enjoyed this. Y'all be good to each other. Love yourselves. Peace.